Hi, everyone. You are listening to Play Now, Play for Life, a podcast by music educators. I'm your host, Aaron Hansen. I'm a former music teacher for 29 years and now a part of the West Music team. Every episode, we sit down and chat with experts in music education to learn about tricks of the trade and topics in music education. And I am so excited that our topic today is Dalcroze. I think it's such a great thing, and I can't wait to talk about it. So our guests today are Lori Forden, who is chair of the Board of Trustees for Dalcroze Society of America, and Jeremy Dittus. Jeremy, you have to tell us your title because I can't pronounce it.
So I have a Diplôme Supérieur in the method Jacques-Dalcroze.
That's an amazing title. So we have two great people to talk about Dalcroze music education today, and it's going to be awesome. So thank you both for being here. Could we just start a little bit about hearing about your personal education, your music education journey, and also how you came into your first steps with Dalcroze?
Sure, yeah. So I came to music education as a second career. And so as I was studying for that and I was studying for my praxis exams, I was doing the studying and looking up and I was looking at the different Dalcroze, Orff, Kodai, and all those things. And I was looking up Dalcroze and I noticed that Dalcroze was happening in Denver. And so that's when I started to learn more about it and got interested in it. And then I signed up for the summer classes and the 2-week intensive. And I got to say, I was hooked, like from the moment I went to that first summer institute, and Jeremy is the leader of the school that I attended because he was living in Denver at the time. And so that's how I got into Dalcroze. And it really, as I grew in learning Dalcroze, it really helped what was happening in the classroom for me. And I was able to, help kids to move and learn in this different way. And it was just a really good fit for me personally in how I wanted to do things in the classroom. So that's my background and my story.
Can I ask this question? I just have so many questions today, but what drew you to the Dalcroze approach?
I think for me, the best way I can describe it is it lit my whole brain up, my whole body and a whole brain. Just as I was moving and using my ears, right, listening, and I was looking around the room at other people and moving and how they were interpreting what they were hearing and how they were moving. We were all doing it together. And I think the communal experience as well. We know that there's a lot of, there's science around, how we, that happens in our brains and how that really enhances an experience for a person. All those things just mixed together, and then doing the things that were, for me as a learner, a challenge. Of course, I went into this already knowing, so many things, like knowing what a quarter note is, eighth note is, was not why I was there, right? But I was there to experience this in a different way and learn how to teach that. But just even taking these elements that can seem so basic to us and putting them in new context and new light, by putting them into your body with whole body movement, it just, I just can't say it another way other than it just lights up your brain in a whole nother way. And it was just, it was something that I just wanted to do more and more of because I wanted to learn how to do that. And then of course, once I got that bug for myself personally, I was like, this is the way I have to teach. If it's good for me, I'm going to love to teach this way. And I think that's so rewarding when you can see that in students and you see them moving and you see them having fun, especially in a public school setting. If they, are those students who are like, we all know the students, oh, I don't do music, or we don't do music, or whatever it is, right? But to see them moving and being able to do these things and learning about music, even if they didn't think they were going to, that day in that way. Those things really that's what keeps me going, and that's what leads me to volunteer my time to help this organization and everything as well.
And Jeremy, what's your background?
Well, I was really fortunate that when I went to undergrad school, that Mary Dubria was my teacher, and she is also a diplôme like myself. And I was just so fortunate that this was a part of the curriculum at the Baldwin Wallace Conservatory of Music in Cleveland, Ohio. And so every week we had movement classes, we had Dalcroze eurythmics. And I used to be a gymnast, so I was a very physical person. And I came to music rather late in life in terms of serious study. So it absolutely fit me like a glove. Understanding things in a kinesthetic way just made sense to me. And I found that it was a wonderful vehicle to find personal expression and to uncover personal expression that maybe I didn't realize was there. So it was really great. And when I went to graduate school and I was finished with my master's degree, I was really kind of in a pickle because I felt like I had this amazing music theory training that I really enjoyed. And I also had this very deep performance background. But I felt like those two worlds did not mesh well together. And I remembered back to my undergrad days and that experience of feeling music from the inside out. And it made such a difference. And I thought, you know what? I want to look more into this. So when I started my doctoral work in piano performance, I went to the Lange School in Boston, Massachusetts, in Cambridge. And I started my Dalcroze certification and went through all of that training. I did my Dalcroze professional certificate there and my Dalcroze license. And then when I finished and I was out in the world doing what I was doing, it became clear that something needed to change because people were asking for teacher training, and I just didn't have the authority to do that. So then I packed up and moved to Geneva, Switzerland, and studied for my Diplôme Supérieur, and came out in 2010 and started my school. So that is the story as it goes.
Okay, I have so many questions. Did you just feel like, as you were growing as an educator, that Dalcroze was like, okay, this is my path. That's kind of what I'm hearing, but
what's really funny is that I did not realize I was going to be so involved in education the way that I am now. All of my music degrees are in performance, with the exception of my Dalcroze credentials. And I think that it wasn't until I was just finished with my my DMA that I thought, I don't know what I want to do. I'm not sure if I really want to go into academic work, which is what most people do when they finish a terminal degree like that. And at that moment, someone called me up on the phone and asked me to come do a workshop for them. And at that workshop was a guy by the name of William Westney, who's written a bunch of books, and one of them that I just love called The Perfect Wrong Note. And he was there, and I ended up doing a master class, and he came to my master class, and I totally fanned out. It was one of those things. Oh my gosh, Bill Westney's in my class. And it's interesting because Bill studied Dalcroze when he was a child, so he has this from a different perspective, even from both Lori and myself, who came to it as adults. And he said something to me that I've never forgotten. It was super kind. But he said, you were born to do this work. This is what you were made for. And it was funny because as soon as I made the decision that I wasn't going to go and search for an academic position, but rather I was going to develop Dalcroze in Denver, at the time I was living in Denver, it seemed like one door after another just seemed to open. So I'm not sure if I believe in kismet and all of that, but it did kind of happen that way, that the universe made it clear to me that this was what I should be doing. And I've been so grateful for it. I've met some of the most extraordinary people like Lori, for example, who are real, true pioneers of the method and go out and do extraordinary things. And I am just always amazed by what this work can do.
And I'm just going to say again, I've said this we've done these podcasts now. I think we're on number 12 or 13 by the time we're hearing you guys. But there's been this recurring theme that someone in your life told you, you know what, you need to continue with this. You need to do this. We have these mentors in our lives that say, you're meant for this work. And it's so powerful because if we didn't have those people, we might not go on and do the things we do. But we have people that say to us, yeah, you need to be part of this and do what you're doing. So I'm happy to hear you say that. Anyway, moving on. How would you describe the Dalcroze approach to teaching? And especially in this 21st century where we're at, we've, thank goodness, come out of COVID. So we're getting back to movement based, we can do that. It was such a hard time, but what would you say are some of the basic principles of the Dalcroze approach to teaching?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, Dalcroze education is an experiential way of teaching. It's an experience. You experience music using all of your senses. Well, maybe not taste, but the relevant senses, right? And then you take that experience and turn that into a theory item later. So it's quite the opposite of somebody standing up and saying, oh, well, here's a quarter note. This gets one beat. Here's an eighth note. It gets half of that, right? And then you're just kind of like your brain's trying to wrap itself around it. But this, when you experience something first, then your brain isn't engaged in that same way of being like kind of stressed out about the terms, right? You're having a chance to feel what this is, describe it using natural language, move it using things that come natural to you, to feel this music. And then the theory comes after that. I think another big part of it too is this movement is very purposeful, but it also has a playful nature. And we all know that children naturally learn through play. And I'm not sure that we ever grow old enough that we don't learn through play, playful movement. And I think that's the magic, as a teacher, when this is the concept I want to get to, here's where I want to go. What happens? How can we lead them to this space where they can really feel this concept? And then later on, when they feel it and they can describe it and they know what it is corporally and through natural language, they're like, oh, yeah, that's a quarter note. Oh, that's an eighth note, right? And then that connection that they have to the abstract or to the theory is so much stronger because they know it. And if they forget that term, well, they still know it. Right. And you can remind them of the term later. So I think these are some of the powerful things. And then I think just the other thing for me, there's lots of things, lots of principles. But another thing I think is the ownership that the students have. Because when you have to move your body, you're not just sitting there singing as quietly as you can so nobody can hear you, right? You are moving in this space. And I think it creates a different sort of ownership. Whole body movement does when you're doing it in a purposeful way and you're engaging the senses of listening, actively listening to what's happening. Is the piano changing? What is happening? So I think those are some of the highlights for me of this method. There's lots of principles and strategies and that help you, because it's not this verse and that verse. It is very much here's a bunch of tools, there's a bunch of principles, and then you as the leader of the class, the teacher, you get to decide how to put these things together to best serve your students, to best serve whoever is in your classroom.
I love it. Jeremy, what do you want to add?
Well, I would 100% agree with Lori. I think that the method itself is so much more than just about music. Music is the heart of it in many ways. Music is the motivator and the stimulator and the regulator in our classroom, in our learning environment. That's what we're aiming to do. But really, it is a philosophy as much as it is anything else, as much as it is a method. Um, Maybe not in a traditional sense, a method, but that's what he would call it. But the thing for me is that through this method, we learn so much about ourselves. We learn so much about our own personal expression of music and how that relates to what we think and feel. And to me, that is really important. It's not just about facts and figures, although we have to have that. We have to understand what the syntax is and the grammar is in the language of music, particularly in the common practice period of the Western art music. This is important. And from there, we can branch out into all kinds of different things. But first and foremost, it starts with each individual student in the room. And they are, in my opinion, valued for their artistic expression right from the get-go and encouraged to find that. And I think that's probably one of the principles that really has drawn me to this work, is that with music as the center, coupled with purposeful movement, it gives all of us new ways of knowing. And it gives us a type, Lori mentioned ownership. And I feel like commitment. I can't tell you how many college students I worked with who can do 2 against 3 because they can do this. But then as soon as they step it into the space, it's a train wreck. And that's because they know it in a very specific way. But when they learn it in this type of a way, with so many different dimensions of approach, those that are visual, those that are oral, those that are verbal, those that are tactile, it stimulates so many different ways of learning. And I think that's just really astounding. I think the other part that is very powerful to me is the way in which Dalcrozians adapt. Adaptation is a huge part of what we do, not just because we're expecting the students to adapt to us, but also because we're adapting to them. You know, it's a real dialogue between the teacher and the student, and also the students amongst themselves. And so that type of learning dynamic is pretty incredible, and it's hard to come by, I have to say. So those are really important parts to me. I think other parts that I think are really critical that go with the adaptation part is the fact that it's very social. And that's not just to say that we have, tea and crumpets after class. It's that while we're in class, we are interacting and learning from one another. I'll never forget, in my training, I had an experience moving with someone that, she was about 15 or maybe 20 years older than I was at the time. And we came from very different walks of life, but I will never forget the experience of moving phrases together. Something so simple, but there was a connection, a human connection made that was so important. And I learned from her in that day. And I've never forgotten it. And when you talk about 21st century education and what does Dalcroze have to do with 21st century education? And I think this is probably one of the more important aspects. We are living in a digital age where these things are killing us in so many ways. I mean, not literally, but as a fabric of society, it's the phone to me is an issue. It doesn't provide connection in the way that I think we need as humans. Dalcroze education gives that. It provides that. So
I 1,000% agree with you, because it's when, it's when they come to their specials classes at school, that's when they need the personal connections, because they're not, and this is nothing against classrooms, because they have lots to do and they have a lot of things to, get done, but they're not getting that personal connection. And it's like, there's nothing better than a folk dance or a movement activity or getting with a partner, like you were saying, Jer. I mean, doing those types of activities that it brings that human connection. Okay, here's another question. So Dalcroze is, I mean, for the most part, movement based. So let's start there. What are the benefits of movement in music education? What would you say?
I am not a scientist by trade, so I'm not going to pretend to be one. I'm not going to pretend to say I know all of this research, although we do have many of our faculty and graduates now, I'm very excited, are pursuing research. Just at the Dalcroze School of Music and Movement alone, I think we have 4 people that are pursuing graduate work right now and are actively looking into creating research projects that help to deepen our understanding of this work in a very sort of objective, peer-reviewed sort of way. Having said that, I can speak from my own experience, and that's to me what matters more than not anything else, but I think it really does matter a lot. And that is, movement offers a nonverbal way of understanding a nonverbal art. So often when people talk about music, they use movement vocabulary. They talk about the flow or the drive or the undulating qualities or the aggressive qualities, etc. They're qualitative. They're movement driven. Those kinds of things are very difficult to describe in words, but we know it when we feel it. And I think that that type of purposeful movement approach really, really offers a deeper dimension of understanding when it comes to music. We can talk about for many days about the theoretical aspects of what makes for a movement learning environment and how does that function inside the brain. But what really matters to me is what happens when students exit and they sense inside of themselves, because that sensation, that feeling, that awareness is what is going to take their performance to the next level. It's what's going to take their desire to communicate to a new dimension. And I think that's very powerful. So that's, to me, the value of, or one of the values of a movement education.
That's an awesome way to put it. And I think that when you're moving, there's so many, like Jeremy talked about the social aspects and, earlier. And I think that that's a big part of when you're moving in the classroom, right? You got a bunch of kids in the same space. Sometimes they're moving fast, sometimes they're moving slow, sometimes they're moving, asymmetrically or however they're moving. And that social aspect of doing that physical movement, the dance that we won't call a dance because but it is the dance of movement in that classroom, and that applies to so much in life, right? How are you moving through life physically in your classroom, in your work, in your job later on, all those things, but feeling there's a person here, seeing there's a person there, but I need to do my thing, picking your path. I mean, all these things, I think it's informing. Even for adults, I think that's great, but for the kids, I think too, it's just some of that kinesthetic learning, and they can mostly do it. And every so often you maybe have to have a conversation, right? But they just know how to do that, but it's strengthening their skills and their awareness around them too, in a social setting, and even physical objects. Don't run into the piano, right? I mean, that kind of thing. But I think that movement in that social setting really adds to the depth of the experience that they're getting. And aside from that movement, like all the things that Jeremy said, which are awesome. And also, I mean, I guess also there's also your balance and your coordination, right? This is a big thing. for kids and for adults. I mean,
Yes.
sometimes, right? Because you go into a Dalcroze class and you're like, wow, I haven't skipped in a while. I haven't done this thing. How often do adults go around leaping? I mean,
Yeah.
it's not.
Well, and as an adult, do you skip with your kids? Do you? You don't
I
know.
do, but yeah, before,
Well, I
but
do too, but
that's
no,
right.
and I think it's so important what you're both saying, that not only just the movement of the body, but it's the interaction too with other students. We're so lacking in that right now. And just the interaction, just how to socially interact. And this teaches that as we're doing it in our classrooms. So,
Because this stuff it's kind of the meat and potatoes of why we do it. And one of the things that will come out in our conversation today is that this method is so multifaceted. It is not just this, it's not just one way of knowing. It really is championing many ways of knowing through the body. But one of the parts that makes this very valuable to me, and I think to students, is that music is not something we can actually touch. We can't put our finger on it. It is something that exists within us. Even I can look at a piece of paper of sheet music and I can hear the music inside of me. I don't have to even have the music playing. That is how deeply a part of the human experience music is. But when we move and we represent music through physical gesture and gross locomotor movement and fine locomotor movement, we make music less arbitrary. We make it less, I don't know, amorphous. It becomes very tangible. It becomes physical. It's something we can see. I can touch the music through my the interactions that I have with a partner, for example. I can feel music within me when I'm working with a ball, for example. And all of that leads to this very deep sense of internalization that Dalcroze used to talk about internal hearing. And I think that that's ultimately what we're after. But the movement is such a powerful gateway in that respect.
well, going on from what you just said, can I ask this next question? As far as Dalcroze's approach, you not only teach movement, but other concepts like rhythm, solfege. Can you talk about a little bit how that pulls into the whole approach and teaching? I'm excited to learn about this because I'm not Dalcroze trained. So
Yeah, so I think that I think the challenge and the thing that I would like to say, I think there's not a musical concept that you can't teach through Dalcroze. I would say that there's a way to probably find a way to communicate that through the body, almost anything, whether it's a solfege concept. And like kind of what Jeremy was saying is making this ethereal thing of like a whole step and a half step. Like what, right? Of course, like we can hear that in auditory, but making that kind of thing physical. The scale, even that, like a major or minor scale, and how does that feel different as you move through space? And of course rhythm. I think there's a lot of rhythm things that are often associated with Dalcroze, right? Doing all the polyrhythms and all these beautiful, lovely, challenging things that we can do, but also even the basic rhythms. And developing, I think, with a lot of these things, the automatization that kind of happens within you, like when you're all of a sudden, like you don't think about tying your shoes, you just tie your shoes. You don't think about how that quarter note is going to feel against these other notes or rhythms, or how those are going to feel. And so that becomes kind of just an automatic thing in your body that happens. And so I think that happens with a lot of these concepts as well. And I don't know, I think hopefully that kind of answered some of what you were asking, but I'm sure Jeremy has a lot to add to that one.
Sure. Well, one thing that's interesting, Lori touched on this, is that people think of Dalcroze and they think of eurythmics. And that's great, although that's not really the only thing. We have eurythmics as one of three core branches. There's eurythmics, there's solfege, and there's improvisation. So those three are our main core subjects. Oftentimes what we learn in eurythmics coupled with what we learn in solfege then comes together and is synthesized through improvisation. And in addition to that, we also have pedagogy and methodology, and then something called plastique animé. Those are our two applied branches. So we have plastique and pedagogy that are these applied branches, and then our core branches of eurythmics, solfege, and improv. Eurythmics, lots of people know from what the Music Man, One Grecian Urn, to what they might have learned in some sort of a college experience, perhaps, or from any other musical training that they might have had. That's what a lot of people know. And so when oftentimes people ask me to come in and do a gig, that's what they want me to work on: rhythm, meter, form, structure, musical elements of that nature. But then there's this whole other aspect of the training that I think is absolutely fascinating. And when all of those things work together, great things happen. And I think that's something else that makes this work really unique, is that it is inherent in the method itself to make connections between all of the different branches. And so people will have these aha moments while they're in solfege and remember 2 years prior when they were in a eurythmics class where something like X, Y, or Z happened. And then 3 years later, they'll be in an improv situation and realize what they were struggling with over here in eurythmics was worked out through solfege, and now they can finally do it at the piano, let's say, or their instrument, whatever their instrument may be. So all of the method really is interrelated. It's really not compartmentalized, even though we have to for clarity and for conversation to talk about it. But truly, that's it. When I am teacher training, one of the things that's so important to me is to stress to students that when we are in a Dalcroze environment, we are focusing on purposeful movement in virtually everything we do. That is the starting point. But in order to really make it function, we have to connect that movement to what we hear, and then possibly to what we see, and then connect that to what we feel, and then connect that to maybe what we play. And any one of those connections, those pathways can happen at any moment. Sometimes the movement directly relates to what I play. And sometimes what I see affects how I move. Sometimes what I see from other people in the hall affects how I play or how I move. It's just so dynamic. And while that is intimidating for sure and daunting, it's also the most exhilarating feeling when it's all working and you can see people doing extraordinary things and growing in that way. Because here's the deal: having good rhythm is important. It's really important. But I don't know if I've ever been to a symphony concert where everything was played exactly in time with one metronome setting from the beginning of the piece to the end. Music breathes. It lives through humans who are living. And I think that there's all sorts of room for flexibility. And that is something that happens when you have this dynamic sort of 5-part approach to a method, because you're not just teaching this one isolated thing. You're teaching this thing in relationship to all of these other things, which I think is really important in a world that we live in now, to realize that the world is much bigger than all of us. And Dalcroze would talk about this when he was working with the students, not just for children, but for the people that the method was created for originally, professional musicians, was to give them this deeper sense of aesthetic meaning. And that deep aesthetic meaning comes from exchange, from play, from experimentation, exploration, all of that. And the method kind of puts all of that together. That makes sense.
can you talk a little bit about how the Dalcroze movement grew and expanded a little bit, just a little bit of the history? Because I don't know that everybody always knows that.
There are lots of great places that you can look to find more. One of the best scholars in North America on Dalcroze education comes from a woman in Canada. Her name is Selma Odom, and she is a dance historian and a Dalcroze expert, particularly in regards to the history and development of the method. So I would strongly recommend seeking out anything written by Selma. The other person who I really would strongly recommend if you wanted to find more is a woman named Monica Dale, who is a colleague of mine. I can't say enough good things about Monica's work. She's one of the most widely published Dalcrozians alive today. She's fabulous. And she has done a lot of research into the development of this method from infancy till today. What I can tell you is that Dalcroze had no intention of coming up with a method. He really wanted his students to be more flexible, to be more expressive. And when I say students, he was a professor of harmony and solfege at the Conservatoire de Genève. So this is a location where Franz Liszt was, for example. And so that he was in good company. Now, Dalcroze was born in 1865 and he died in 1950. So that's the window of time. And what he noticed was that when he would go for walks with his students, in typical Swiss style, the students had to be next to and slightly behind their professor, that you couldn't walk as equals. You had to walk just behind. And he would walk through the parks in Geneva with his students, and he was kind of a jokester. He liked to play, and he would make sharp turns. And so, to not be rude to their professor, they would have to run to catch up with him. I mean, he would make these very fast, abrupt turns, and he just thought it was silly. But what he noticed was that they never really missed a beat. They were always able to stay right with him in these moments when he was playing. But those very same students, he could take them into a rehearsal and conduct them through a Chopin etude, and they could not modify their tempo and stretch time and push time the way you do with rubato, the way that they could push and pull time when they were going for a walk. And so then he thought, I wonder if there's something that we could work on here. And so that's where it started. That's how it kind of began. And I'm sure there are other legends. That's the legend as it was told to me. After that, it really started to develop within the Conservatoire de Genève. And then eventually he wanted to do other things. And so he established a garden community in Hellerau, Germany. And people came from all over the world to study with him and to see what was going on. Adolf Appia, who is largely responsible for what we now know as modern lighting for all theater and stage production, was there. People like Diaghilev from the Ballet Russe would come and to see what was happening. And of course, this had profound impacts on major composers of the time, like Stravinsky and Bloch and others. So it was quite interesting at that time. People came from England as well. They came from off the continent. And that was the first major country where Dalcroze was developed, I would say, outside of the continent of Europe. So Switzerland, and then Germany, and then England. And it is there that we have this issue with the term eurythmics, because Dalcroze did not call this method eurythmics. He called it la rythmique Jacques-Dalcroze. So la rythmique Jacques-Dalcroze, that is the method Jacques-Dalcroze. But when he got to England, they needed something that the British folks could say. And so they came up with this idea of eurythmics, eur standing for good, and rhythmos, rhythm. So eurythmics. And at that time, that was the name of the method, was Eurythmics. And then they had these branches, rhythmic, solfege, and improv. When it came to the United States in the first part of the 20th century, we're talking in the aughts of the 1900s, it came over as Eurythmics, but what they offered was the rhythmics class. And so in the United States, we have come to call this method Eurythmics, but it's also a branch of the method. And that's one of the reasons why, too, that a lot of Dalcrozians will use the term Dalcroze education to describe what it is.
Okay, so just to clarify, this is not black and white, but you would call this a method.
I would say this. I'm a big person that likes to go back to the source. So what did Jacques-Dalcroze say? What was his MO? And all throughout his books, he calls it a method.
Okay.
But it is not a method like we think of it in a 21st century context.
Yeah.
And to this extent, I feel like it's a little bit of semantics, although I understand that there's a nuance here, but there are times when it's a method. There's times when it's a philosophy. There's the time when it's a psychology. There are times when Dalcroze is a performance art. It doesn't exist in one dimension. And so I have no problem if somebody calls it a method. I also have no problem if somebody calls Dalcroze an approach. I tend to say, if I'm going to say that it's a method, I will say it in French, La méthode Jacques-Dalcroze. That's what I would say, because I don't want to confuse people into thinking it's a method like, this is not how you play tiddlywinks, or this is not a method of making bread. Step by step, you must do this, and then this, and then this, and then this.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm totally with you, because I feel it's the same with any of these. Is this called a Kodai approach? Right. A Kodai method? It's like, well, we can get stuck in semantics, but what are we really doing? And you've explained very well, like, what is Dalcroze doing? So let's talk a little bit about Dalcroze teacher training.
The Dalcroze Society of America at dalcrozeusa.org, there is a lot of information on where you can go get training. One of the most important things is that if you want Dalcroze training, is it to make sure that your training center is led by somebody who has the degree that Jeremy has, the Diplôme Supérieur. And so we have all those schools listed on our website. And then there's a committee that has been around for 15 years, Jeremy, maybe, the Professional Development Committee. Is it maybe a little longer? 13 years. Okay. And so that's been around for a long time. And what they've done is they have created, it was just this enormous collaboration, this body of work, all these people who held the terminal degree and some people who had been a long time teaching, and they got together and created the teacher training manual, the T-squared program. So that is something that is maintained, and if you want to be part of the T-squared program, the Dalcroze Society of America will accredit you with that program. And then it's just it's a set of guidelines. It's not a prescription per se, but it's a set of guidelines that kind of outlines levels and stuff, and Jeremy will say that. And I want to say the one thing that's different about Dalcroze compared to like ORF is that ORF, your training happens through the AOSA, right? But here with Dalcroze, you will go to a training center. We don't deliver training. We have lots of resources on our website, but we don't deliver training itself. You need to go to a training center that's led by someone who has a Diplôme Supérieur.
The one thing I want to say about the teacher training in the US is that when the method started, it developed a lot of pockets. Pittsburgh was a pocket. New York was a pocket. Boston was a pocket. Cleveland was a pocket. Madison, Wisconsin was a pocket. Bethlehem, Pennsylvania became a pocket. So there were all of these different training centers. And before the internet, people really kind of developed their own ideas and their own ways of doing this work. And in 2012, we decided to come together to create standards. And so it's very exciting because in the 100+ years that the method had been in the United States, we were never able to do that. It just, each individual school was really kind of an island into itself. And we were just not in a position until that moment to be able to really gain consensus. And so it's really thrilling to look at that situation that we have now, to say, yeah, now we do have standards. And to be honest, we got a lot of inspiration from the AOSA and from the Kodai Association, because we felt that we needed to do something that was recognizable to others. And so we looked at structures that different organizations had to create our own. But at the same time, it was important for us to have individual expression and autonomy. Dalcroze teacher training is not ever offered to an institution. So an institution is never authorized to offer a credential. A diplôme is granted the authority or the responsibility of offering a credential. So that's a subtle nuance, but it's an important one to note, because it's part of the reason why in the United States, if you study at different schools, they will have very different feels to them. They have different structures in place. But accreditation is gigantic, because the schools that are a part of the accreditation, we all say that we believe that these basic base level skills in each subject area, we are all going to ensure that our students have those skills. And so that way, it doesn't matter if I'm looking to hire somebody out of Boston or out of New York, wherever, if they are accredited, I can say with authority, with conviction, with confidence, that that person understands these things, because they've been through the program and they have passed all of their evaluations. And all of the evaluations adhered to a particular procedure, etc. So that way it's fair and equitable, and even if it's challenging, it is something that will be ultimately of value, you know? So that's a little bit of that history. But now that we have the T-Squared program, what I can tell you is that the programs that are a part of that, which include my school and the Dalcroze Institute of New England, which is coupled with the Winchester School in Boston, and the Lucy Moses School, which is out of New York, and the Colburn School, which is in California, those programs all are accredited, and they will have 3 levels. Just like ORF. Level 1 is the introductory credential. The level 2 is the applied credential, and level 3 is the professional certificate. So once you achieve level 3 and you've passed evaluations in solfege, improv, and eurythmics, and you're teaching practicum, then you are authorized to call yourself a Dalcroze teacher and to offer Dalcroze coursework. So it's an important sort of rite of passage to get to that certificate level for us, because that means that you can actually teach the method to musicians of all ages up through an early intermediate level. Once you are finished with the certificate and you have that in hand, then you can move towards the license. And the Dalcroze license, it has only 2 levels, levels 4 and level 5. And when you finish with that, then you are able to teach the method for all ages and at all levels, even assisting with teacher training. So the only thing that you can't do as a licentiate is actually run a program. That is not it, but you can absolutely be a part of it. The students that have graduated from my program, or students that have graduated from the Laundry School, for example, or even in other places, they have come and been on my faculty, for example, and we work well together, and it's a great thing. If you want to become a teacher trainer, then you need to go to Switzerland. The only place in the world where you can get a Diplôme Supérieur is at the Institut Jacques-Dalcroze. And the real reason for that is because it's the only place on the planet that has the depth of programming. in For example, at this Dalcroze School of Music and Movement, we offer for all ages and levels, and we offer the full array of teacher training up through the license. But we don't have classes for senior citizens, and we don't have classes for children with special needs. That's not to say that they aren't in our classes, then they love them, but we don't offer any specialized classes for them. And I don't actually offer any classes for, let's say, infants and toddlers. It's just not my area. But other places might. Do you know what I mean? And at the Institute Jacques-Dalcroze, they do. And so that's why we go to study there, because that is where you can see all of it in one building. So that's kind of the big overview. If I want to break it down to make it even easier, I would say the certificate is our bachelor's, the license is a master's, and the Diplôme Supérieur is the doctorate. If that makes sense.
So, Jeremy, if I was just to come to a level 1, what am I going to see?
You will start every day with a movement class. So that's a techniques of the body type class where you're learning movement vocabulary, learning new ways to explore the space and time and energy together. And then you have about an hour and a half of eurythmics. And then you have about an hour and 10 minutes of pedagogy. And then you break for lunch. And then when you come back, we have an hour of solfege, an hour of improv, and then there will be classes in this third hour in the afternoon that deal with either keyboard harmony or pedagogy demonstration classes. So the way that we do it at our school is we divide that up into two communities. So first years and then second and third years, for example. And then on one day they have keyboard harmony, the next day they have pedagogy demo. And whoever is in keyboard harmony on this day, the other group has pedagogy demo. You see how it's just kind of alternating every other day? And then for the first week, there is plastique animé. That's always a real treat, to work on a piece of music, to explore using the body, but in a community atmosphere. So for example, last year at the DSM, we did some music of Aaron Copland. He was our theme. But in particular, we worked on vocal music, which to my knowledge, and it's for me as a Dalcrozian, I had never done plastique to vocal art music. So it was so much fun to do that. We did the 12 poems of Emily Dickinson, which was extraordinary to get to do that. And so that's what we did. And then the next week, it's basically the same thing, except for we have a little bit more time spent on improvisation each day. And we don't have plastique. So that's what it looks like from day to day.
Just to clarify, a normal levels course, does that run, did you say 1 week or 2 weeks?
It depends on the institution.
Okay.
At the DSM, we are a 2-week program, a 2-week summer intensive.
Okay.
And if you are at New York at Lucy Moses, same thing. The Lingerie School is a 3-week program for their certification. And that is for level 1. And so each level requires essentially a summer at a program.
Okay, you guys are sharing so much information. Okay, let me ask this question. Where do teachers learn more about Dalcroze? I mean, I looked at your website, so if you want to share that. And are there any benefits as far as becoming like a member to the... Can you share a little bit about that too? I know there's always stuff here, so.
Yeah, so definitely dalcrozeusa.org is a great place. If you become a member, then you have access to our library. And our library is growing and growing. We have a bunch of stuff that's going to be added to it probably in the next 6 to 8 months as well. And there's lots of recorded classes. There are lesson plans. There's articles out there. There's things that will tell you more about the method itself. And there's a members side, but then we also have a blog, which I would highly encourage everyone to go check out our blog. Lots of just amazing stuff out there. People have written articles. I mean, you'll see some by Jeremy, some by our other diplomes who've written stuff, and other people who have lesson plans and other experiences out there to kind of dip your toe, learn about it. Becoming a member, and then you'll get, we have a beautiful magazine that gets produced twice a year. So a member will have access to that as well. Lots of really great information in there. And so then we always, I also want to mention that if you're in certain places, there will be a local chapter. So that would be if you're in those places, if you're in Denver, Utah, Boston, New York, who am I missing?
California.
California.
California,
Ohio. That's the one I'm missing. Yes. Some lovely chapter experiences. Most of us, we're all putting on workshops throughout the year at different times. Consider maybe attending our conference. And that's a great way to kind of just meet a bunch of teachers, have a bunch of experiences and things like that.
Are there any really good Dalcroze resource materials that are your standards?
Well, yes. So the first thing I want to say, and this is probably controversial, but it's just how I feel. Learning Dalcroze through a book is sort of like learning how to hug by reading about it. And so I think this is one of the hardest aspects of this work. I certainly remember when I first started, it was very tricky for me because I wanted it to go faster than it did. But the truth of the matter is you cannot rush your development in this work. It's impossible. It doesn't matter how badly you want it. It's going to take the time it's going to take. And so what I want to share about that is when I started, I'm a total book junkie, love books, love them, have so many that I cherish, that I bought as much as I could and I was reading them and I just didn't understand what I was reading. It didn't make sense to me. It didn't necessarily match what I understood was happening in the classes, but it was really because I just didn't understand enough about the method. And then I went back to those very same resources 3 years later after I got my certificate. And I was like, oh my God, this is brilliant. This is so good. But I didn't know it at the time. I couldn't know it.
Well, you have to, it's like ORF learning. You have to experience it first.
You do.
Is my opinion.
You really do.
Then you can go back and read and it's like, oh yeah, this makes all the sense now. But just to read it, I didn't have any experience.
Yeah. It's such a huge part of what we do. And, I've published now 10 volumes of books, either on teacher training or methodology for children's programs. And yet I how do I want to say this? The teacher training books that I have they don't read like how you expect a teacher training book necessarily to read, because it's really giving you skills to learn how to create your own stuff. Yeah. And that's really what Dalcrozians are aiming to do, is to have their graduates go out into the world and create artistic experiences that resonate from their own selves, not somebody else's ideas, but yours. Even if I might use ideas that some of my predecessors might have given me, as soon as I start teaching it, it's my own. Lori uses some of the curriculum that we have here at the DSM, but I guarantee you, if you walk into Lori's classroom, it's going to look really different from what I'm doing. And the students are going to be equally engaged and loving it because it's Lori who's doing the teaching. And she's bringing all of herself into the experience. So I think I'm happy to share with you some resources. If you give me 2 seconds, I'm going to go grab them and I'll show them so you can see them.
Well, can I add to that too, that we have a series called the Dalcroze Lab, And these are things that you can sign up for and have an online experience too. So that happens through the DSA. So sign up at least for our newsletter to get that information.
Oh, cool.
Okay, I just brought a small collection, all right? Just a small collection, and this is just methodology, kind of pedagogy stuff.
Okay.
So this is my holy grail. This is written by Heather Gell, and it's Music, Movement, and the Young Child. You can see
I've never seen that book.
it is a beautiful book.
Okay.
It is a beautiful book. It's out of print, but you can find it, and you could find older copies of it, and it's just great. There are also some newer versions of this, coupled with another volume that Heather Gell wrote, and it's not the same, but it's very good, and you can find that. It is produced by Dalcroze Australia. It comes out of Australia because Heather Gell was Australian. And then this is Elsa Finley, and she wrote this book, Rhythm and Movement.
Yes.
And I love this book. I really love this book. Between the two of them, I mean, both of them studied with Dalcroze himself. And they both did amazing things. Elsa Finley basically championed the Dalcroze program at the Cleveland Institute of Music back in the day. And so she, I don't know if she was the first person that she was brought in, but she was the person that really developed and established that program. So she was amazing. And what I love about this book is that it's very succinct. It has very clear ideas. The thing that's hard about it, I'll just be honest, for both of them, is that there is a large assumption made on behalf of the authors that you are a Dalcrozian and you understand how to create the music for these things. Monica Dale, who's a friend of mine, does amazing things. And she wrote these Eurythmics for Young Children, 6 lessons for winter. There's one for fall and there's one for spring. I really like
one either.
She's her books are available in all sorts of places, but you can also just write to her. Her website is called musickinesis.com. So you can check that out. She actually has lots of song literature inside, and she even has some examples of improvisation that are written out, just short little snippets to kind of stimulate your ideas.
Okay.
And then last one, this one by a colleague of mine out of Switzerland, although she is, I believe, Australian. Her name is Mary Bryce. And she wrote this book called The Unfolding Human Potential. And this is an extraordinary course. So if you can find a copy of this, love it.
You are both delightful, and I love you both. I'm so glad to get to know you and more about the Dalcroze world. However, we always end our podcast with a lightning round of fun music questions. And I know you have no idea what I'm going to ask you. So there are no wrong answers. You just say what you feel. What is your favorite time signature to move to?
Well, currently, I think I'm a little obsessed with 7. 7/8.
I didn't expect that answer. That's a good answer. I love that answer, but I didn't expect it.
It's got so much. I mean, there's so many things and so many ways it can be.
Do you like it? How do you like it? Like 2-2-3, 3-2-2? Does it matter?
Yes. I mean, all those are good answers. And I think that's why it's so fun. I know that's,
I do love 7.
I mean, they're all fun, but I think that one is even more fun than 5, right? I don't know. That's just it
is more fun than 5.
My answer might change, I don't know, in a few years. That's where I'm at right now.
Jeremy, what's yours?
I'm a compound triple kind of guy. I love anything in compound triple. 9/8, 9/4, 9/16. Give me 9.
Oh my gosh, you guys are you're so advanced. I love it. Okay, those are all good answers. All right, here's your next one. Which would you prefer in your classroom, a skip or a gallop?
Do I have to choose?
Yes.
Let's see. I think the skip is slightly less exhausting than the gallop, but I think they're both really great, like physically exhausting. But I think they both have their time and place. And I would be hard pressed to really choose, truthfully.
Jeremy?
Oh, I'm a galloper. I need to gallop.
I find the gallop slightly easier than the skip. The skip, to me, teaching to kids is always the most challenging one. I don't know how your
Sure.
kids
Well,
are.
developmentally, it's like
difficult. The gallop they pick up on, and then it's always that dang skip. And I'm like, okay, how do I do this another way? Because we got to get the skip. Favorite musical?
Oh, that's easy. A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder.
I knew you were going to say that.
Oh my gosh, where did you see that?
I've seen it a lot of places. It won a Tony.
I saw it on Broadway.
Yes, we saw it on Broadway. We saw it in Colorado when we lived there. And we've seen it here in Dallas, actually.
Okay, Lori, what's yours?
This one's kind of a tricky one for me. I don't know. If I could go with like a movie, like Sound of Music, can I go with that? Like,
of course. Well, that's a musical.
For me, it's
I love that show.
I've never seen that, anywhere but on this, TV screen.
Love that show. Okay, here's your last one. This is kind of personal. Something in your life that is a favorite musical memory.
Oh, I think that's easy for me. I think it was when I remember back, my dad plays a piano, and I remember just standing next to him and singing the songs that he was playing. To me, that will always hold a special place for me.
Oh, that's a great memory.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is my favorite part of the podcast is I get to hear these things and I never know what people are going to share. And then it's like, oh my gosh, that's a great memory.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeremy.
I feel like it's tricky because like there's those things that you're talking about, Lori, like my mom was my first piano teacher. And so that's something that I really cherish, that even though I was a terrible student, awful student, I lasted 6 months with her and then she had to kick me out.
She gave up.
And then she's like, yeah, no, this is not going to work. Yeah. There's just so many. I will share this one. This is kind of a funny one. It's not nearly as sentimental in a good way like Lori's is, that's really touching. But I remember the first time I had an experience performing where I felt like I was in the moment performing and inclusively aware of what was going on around me. And that had never happened to me before. I was never in a place where I could do that. I was always just focused on my playing. I could not take in anything else. And I remember I was playing Rachmaninoff, like it was yesterday. I remember exactly the piece and what I was doing. And I had this weird moment where like I felt like there were almost two parts of me. That there was the part that was performing and was very much so in this very flow state. And there was this other part of me that was just sort of observing what was going on. And I remember that performance. It was one of the most, remarkable ones that I had ever had in my undergraduate life. And it made a huge impression on me because I had never had that experience. So that was a pretty strong memory for me.
Well, you two are both amazing people. I'm so glad to meet you. And I just want to thank Jeremy and Lori for joining us. And I want to thank everyone for listening, because this has been the Play Now, Play for Life podcast with Aaron. And if you enjoyed our episode, please consider subscribing and leaving a rating and a review. And you can find us at westmusic.com/playnowplayforlife. We're also on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and X. And you can find those links in the description. Play Now, Play for Life is a podcast by West Music.